So I'm going to do some ISO tests in the studio where I can control the light, the color temperature, the spill, and everything else just like I do with any of my other cameras. And I'm using false color to expose my skin tone to make sure that nothing is blown out, and clearly the drop off in the gradients in the back are going to drop off into clipping the blacks or the dark areas. But this will give me a sense as to how the codec actually behaves, and that is what my objective in these tests are going to be. So this is ISO 400 at f4 on a 14mm prime, and this is 24p in C-Log, 4K internal and external. And this is what we get. Let me show you the gray card. And I always put the gray card next to the point of interest because this is clearly where we want to focus and where we don't want colors to shift, because when skin tones shift, post-processing gets super interesting. All right, I've now jumped down to the low ISOs. So this is ISO 100. So this is below where Canon wants you to be when you're shooting in Canon C-Log. What this will actually do is essentially crush the blacks. But my face is properly exposed. I did have to stop down to, or open up rather, to f2.8. And again, ISO 100. Checking out what the banding might be when you're capturing in C-Log. Okay, this shot is now at ISO 200, so this is still the low ISO mode on the Canon EOS R. I am still capturing in C-Log, and I believe the blacks are going to get crushed really fast, but what I'm most interested in is determining whether there will be any visible banding, especially when I render the video out in H.264 so that I can upload to YouTube, which is what generally causes the majority of the banding issues when you're capturing an 8-bit. So let's move on and go through the rest of the ISO range. Okay, this is now 800 ISO on the Canon EOS R, still at 14mm, and I'm back up to f4. And what I did is I dimmed the light down to make sure that I could shoot the rest of the clips at f4. And I'll do that as long as I can in this environment so that I don't get any shifts in color, and so that every single shot is matched to the same f-stop. So here's my gray card. And this is what ISO 800 on the Canon EOS R looks like when capturing in 8-bit C-Log. Okay, so this is now 1250 ISO, and the reason why I stopped here instead of jumping all the way up to 1600 is because 1250 is actually an ISO that I do happen to shoot in from time to time. So this is a usable ISO for the type of work and type of productions that I work in, and why it is that I'm doing this test. So I'm at 1250 ISO, f4 on the Canon EOS R in C-Log, 8-bit, capturing internal, and then also capturing on an Atomos recorder. So let's check the gray card. That'll make it way easier in case I, for some reason, messed up my white balance, to make sure that all the shots match across the entire test. So let's move on and check out what 1600 looks like. So as you would expect, the background is getting a lot brighter as we go on, because that I am not adjusting, right? So this is still f4, 14mm, capturing in C-Log, 8-bit, and I am at ISO 1600. So 1600 ISO, f4, Canon EOS R in C-Log, 8-bit internal, and then also on the Atomos recorder. So let's continue to push through and see what the rest of the ISO range looks like. Okay, this shot is now at 3200 ISO at f4 on the Canon EOS R in C-Log internal, so that's 8-bit because it can only do 8-bit internal. And the background clearly has way more detail than when we started. And I believe that as soon as I bump the ISO up again, I will have to make some adjustments to my background light to make sure that I don't clip the highlights in the background, because I am getting very, very close. In fact, right on this side right here, which is the closest place to where the actual light is. Let me show you. That's the light I'm using. So that's the light I'm using. That is already reaching that high yellow color, which means it's going to start going into the orange and red, which essentially means it's clipped. So yeah, we're going to see how this does, but we're gonna continue to push the ISO and make some light adjustments, and I'm gonna have to adjust the background. Okay, so this is ISO 6400, and the exposure on my skin has not been adjusted yet, but I just wanted to show you why it is that I'm going to have to make adjustments to the background, because I'm already clipping. There are hot spots right in the light, which basically means it's going to look really nasty because DSLRs clip highlights really fast. So let's make some adjustments. We'll go back to the test. Okay, I've made the adjustments to the background light as well as to the light that was exposing my skin. So I'm back to an f4 here on the highlight side of my face, and I am at an f2 right where it begins to drop off, and then of course it very quickly drops off. But f4 ISO 6400 in C-Log, capturing internally, so that's 8-bit C-Log. And the other thing that I wanted to point out is that I'm using false color, right, to keep my exposure essentially the same across all these ISOs, particularly at the point of interest, which is this talking head piece. Now, in false color, it's very easy to see where the banding will actually occur, right? So obviously, the closer it is to where the light source is, which is right there, that's going to be more intense light, and then it drops off as it moves away. But I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 bands of different exposure ranges in false color. So it'll be interesting to see how that actually translates to the video, especially when you compress it. So that's the reason why I'm doing the test, because I want to check out the banding, essentially, if there is banding at high ISOs when I export so that I can upload to YouTube. Okay, this is 12,800 ISO in 8-bit, capturing C-Log 8-bit internally on the Canon EOS R. I made adjustments to the background light. I had actually dimmed that down all the way to 30% of the output capacity. And my key light, which is what's exposing me here at f4, is just about as dim as it can go. And it is approximately 7 feet away from me. So this is what ISO 12,800 looks like. What I'm going to be most interested here, given that I will likely never push my camera or my ISO exposure to 12,800, is how much noise is around the point of interest. Paying special attention to my eyes, which are naturally dark, right? They're dark, they're black, essentially. So if I have noise in the eyes, that's something I can't fix. If I have noise in the skin tones or in the gradients, that's something that I can't fix, which instantly makes for the take or the clip to not be usable. But if there's noise back here and none in the point of interest, then using noise reduction is actually not going to completely destroy the part of the area or the image that you want people to focus on. The second thing that I want to check out here is going to be the banding, because as I mentioned at ISO 6400, I can see multiple bands in false color where the exposure values are very different because of the spot that I'm basically shooting right into the background. So we will bring it into post, and we're going to go through this entire cycle again, but this time we're going to do it in 10-bit, which means I cannot record in camera. I can only do it through the Atomos recorder, and we're going to go through that next.